Thank you for coming, everyone. Welcome to the American Precision Museum. Someday we hope to host these kind of events in a new education and conference center. That'll be up on our second floor. We're in the process of a fundraising campaign right now to raise $2.8 million to renovate the second floor and create a center like that we can host events and get some more chairs so you're not so cramped in. But that hopefully will be completed by December of 2026. So, Abraham Mergerdichian was a career machinist who worked in a factory making aircraft engine parts. In his spare time, Abe crafted his interpretations of everyday objects in miniature and full size from scrap metal. When he passed in 1983, Abe left behind hundreds of objects, many of which he had made as gifts for his family and his friends. In 2013, Abe's son Robert and his wife Becky received many of Abe's art pieces, and from that moment, Robert committed himself to a mission: to have his father recognized as a bona fide artist and his machine pieces as art. Robert has had these pieces exhibited at nearly 36 venues around the country. As for Robert, in 2022, he received his master's in nonprofit management from Worcester State University in Massachusetts, hoping to one day open the Mergerdichian Museum to feature Abe's art. Robert is an architectural consultant and has many hobbies, including restoring baseball gloves, hosting and producing a television program, and painting. I give you Robert Mergerdichian and his presentation, Love in Metal. Welcome.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been here before, and it's just such a cool place, and we're really privileged to be given the opportunity to display some of my father's machine, which is over there, and his art pieces. I'm going to get right to the chase here. So this presentation is a little bit different in that you'll find it right from the get-go that this is not the normal kind of, here's my father in year one and here's my father in year two. So I hope you like it. So Dad, I'm here at the American Precision Museum in Windsor, Vermont, to give another presentation about you and your artwork. So Vermont, huh? You're really getting around, Rob. Well, I am. As an introduction, please tell the folks about yourself, starting with your background. Well, Rob, your grandma and grandpa were immigrants from Armenia, and both passed through Ellis Island. Let me advance one here. Okay. So Grandpa went to Franklin, Massachusetts to live with his uncle, and Grandma came later as a mail-order bride. We moved to an apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts when I was about 6 years old. So here he is at 6 years old in Cambridge. Among our neighbors were many Italians, Portuguese, Irish, and Armenians. Rob, we spoke only Armenian at home, and I didn't speak English till I entered school. Just as an aside, I didn't speak English till I entered school either. So that was 2 generations of that. And high school, Dad, what about that? Rob, I was among a dozen would-be machinists, this is what I was just referring to you about, in a special machining class at Ringe Tech, where I graduated in 1942. Because of the war and shortages of things like paper, we didn't get a yearbook. So here he is with his parents around the time of his graduation. But being wartime, upon graduation I got a job right away at General Electric in Everett, Massachusetts, making aircraft engine parts. So you didn't stay long at GE, Dad. For 1943, you joined the Navy, right? Well, that's right, Rob. Nearly all the guys enlisted in those days. I got stationed in the Pacific aboard an LCI, that's short for Landing Craft Infantry. We ferried Marines and delivered supplies right up onto the beaches in the Philippines. So this was his ship, flat-bottomed. I was the ship's cook. So here he is, the C. C stands for cook. Then I got honorably discharged in 1946 and got my machinist job back at General Electric, but in Lynn. In 1951, I bought our only house in Cambridge. Sir, do you want to sit right here? Okay. Dad, please tell us a little bit about your work at GE. Well, Rob, during my 30-minute lunch break, I'd buy scrap metal at the recycling bin. I began making replacement parts for things that were broken at home. My fellow machinists started calling me the Tinkerer, which coincidentally my shipmates had called me too, because I often had to repair equipment in my galley aboard ship. So what household replacement parts did you make, Dad? Well, I made a lot of handles, like the spare ones for my lunch pail. So that's actually two handles that he made. This one is steel, this one is aluminum. I made the brass handles for Mom's snakeskin pocketbook, and these are the replacement handles. She loved this pocketbook. She didn't like it so much after he put the new handles on because she said the handles weighed more than the pocketbook did. I made aluminum replacement part for the shoe tree. So this is the actual shoe tree, and this is the shoe tree with his replacement part. It's dated March 4th, 1982. He died in 83, so this was towards the end of his life. I also made a handle for your little red wagon. Dad, the wagon doesn't look red. Well, it was, Rob, when you were only 2 years old. So that's the replacement handle. And that's the handle that broke, and that's me when I'm 2 years old in that wagon. Okay, so what was up with the lavender color? So, Rob, after some time, sometime after I took that photo, I came across some paint. Knowing how much your sister liked purple, I started painting everything that color. Your wagon, the basement stairs, even the solid steel headache ball for the end of a cable of a construction crane. I painted the ball and chained it around your brother-in-law's ankle at your sister's shower as a gag. So this is my brother-in-law at my sister's shower with the 42-pound ball, painted lavender, and the chain. So guess where he wasn't going? He wasn't going anywhere. So he was stuck at that shower. Not necessarily that that's a bad thing, but it was a bad thing for him. So Dad, you made your own power tools too. One of them is here. Yes, I made a compressor on wheels and a belt sander for which I used 2 rubber rollers from an ancient washing machine, and I made a bandsaw. Well, Dad, none of those old power tools exist except for the buffer grinder. And there it is, and that's over there, by the way. Well, that's good, Rob. I reused an old Maytag washing machine motor and made the legs from salvaged 2x4s. Now, this is the Tinkerer coming out, okay? So just so you know, Dad, I had that machine exhibited twice before this exhibit, but not before I had it fumigated because insects had gotten into those 2x4 legs. If you look real close, there's little holes. The holes are there. The insects have been killed off with fumigation. But Rob, speaking of machines, do you remember my shish kebab machine from 1969? So here's my father in his black socks and white sneakers with the shish kebab machine. So I remember, Dad, how you could cook shish kebab for throngs of people with that thing. We are, after all, Armenians, and Armenians eat lamb and more lamb, so that machine really got a workout. You'd turn the handle and spin all the skewers set on gears. Now, Dad, tell the folks how you got started making gifts for all of us in the family. Rob, after I made replacement items and power tools, I wanted to become more artistic. At lunch at work, I'd rough out some pieces on my Bridgeport milling machine and then bring them home to work on them in my basement workshop. So here's Dad, 1953, May, making me that truck. So now listen to what I'm saying here. He's making me an aluminum truck that's this big with not necessarily the smoothest edges, and I'm about 3 months old. So something's a little bit wrong here. Well, that was kind of weird, Dad, that you did that. Well, here's the truck. And this is about this big. This is one of the bigger pieces, by the way. So at the curtain at the rear of the trailer is reminiscent of Methuen duck cloth made by the Nevins Company in Methuen, Massachusetts, which is where I live and Becky live. So this is the same tractor, but the body is the car carrier. Those are replacement ramps back here. They were lost and remade by a cousin of mine who happens to have a machine shop. And finally, this is the same tractor again, but this time as a log carrier. And Rob, I used broomsticks for the logs. I think they probably have leaded paint, but that's beside the point. Another thing, leaded paint, rough edges for a little kid. Makes a lot of sense. So making my interpretations of everyday items was becoming a real hobby, Rob. I just wanted to make more and more pieces. So I started creating them as gifts for every holiday, birthday, anniversary, graduation, and so on. The GE guys, all competent machinists like myself, would come over at lunchtime and ask if they could watch me make my gifts. So again, he's roughing them out at work, and he would bring them home and finish them at home, including buffing them. And I myself have buffed some of these items for hours on that buffing machine. So, Rob, I found all that flattering. So here's a picture of him. Again, this is the confidence that he exuded with, as machinists. All these guys were machinists just like him. I have tried to find them. They're probably all gone at this point. They would all be maybe 100 if they are alive. So, Dad, let's get back to my little red wagon. How did you come up with the idea of a miniature of it? Well, Rob, with the wagon and practically everything else, I'd just look at something and say, I can create that object and make someone smile. So this is the wagon. It's only about this big. Well, Dad, your artwork has been making people smile for quite a while. In the 1970s, you had 3 exhibits in Massachusetts, the third with other artists in our church hall. And here's my father in the 1970s, items on the table. Well, Rob, I did enjoy those opportunities to exhibit my pieces. I liked walking around the room and talking to our friends while Mom minded the exhibit. There's the table with things just on the table. We weren't so concerned about security and theft and all that stuff at that time. And I know that this is my mother because I recognize the legs. Dad, what do you think was the best part of those exhibits? Rob, I'm sure the folks there at the museum will appreciate that nothing gave me a thrill as much as the kids' expressions when they saw the animals or toys that I had made. And like what? Well, like the little brass turtle with a smile on his face. That's this big. And then there was the aluminum starfish pendant. There was the full-size clamshell. And Rob, I made the aluminum frog for your sister as a housewarming present after she got married and bought her house. I hinged it at the rear, so it's hinged back here, so she could hide a spare key to the house in its belly, which she did. And so for years, this little guy sat under the bush in the backyard with the house key in its belly. Rob, I even made several aluminum birdhouses. There's one of them. And the same fellow who made the ramps, that I said was a machinist, in California, was one of the people for whom my father made a birdhouse. Several of these birdhouses still exist as birdhouses. I'll tell you later, Dad, about a special photo of one of them. So now, tell us, Dad, about your and Mom's personal favorites among the several hundred items that you crafted. Rob, I think Mom really appreciated the 80 or so jewelry pieces that I made for her. These are all stainless steel. J for Jenny. Lots of ball bearings, so this is the industrial nature of what he was doing. This was Mom's favorite, I think, of all of them. 21 little ball bearings there. Rob, aside from jewelry, I based my brass roller skates on your mother's old skates. So these are my mom's actual skates. Some of you may know what these are, and that they clamp on to the bottom of your shoes, namely sneakers, and the strap goes around your ankle, and then you tighten it with this key. So these are his roller skates. The wheels have bearings in them, and these are about this big. So Rob, one of Mom's favorite items, as well as everyone else's, was the piano that I made for her. Oh, that's not a piano. That's a sled. That's my mom's actual sled. That's a big one, like this high. And here it is. It says flexible flyer on it. Okay. Here's the piano. Every hinge works, and you can fold it all up. The music, just so you get an idea, is about that big. I incorporated a music box. The key is back here. So it plays B.J. Thomas's Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. I think Mom got a little charge out of those tiny little sheets. It does play, but we don't play it very often because it plays very slowly. Dad, wasn't the piano the piece that someone wanted to purchase from you? Well, yes, a fellow offered me the equivalent of several weeks' pay for it back in 1973, but I just couldn't part with it. But Rob, undoubtedly, Mom's all-time favorite was none other than the brass violin, which is here. So here's a photo of the actual violin that my sisters played in high school. I made a dimensioned sketch of it, and I used actual horsehair for the bow, which can be removed from the case and which closes up. And that's very nicely set up over there, by the way. Dad, seeing that sketch of the violin makes me think that I don't recall seeing many other sketches. So how did you create the pieces with such scaled precision? Rob, I just had an eye for it. Achke chap, as they say in Armenian. I didn't make many sketches, Rob, but I did sketch my idea for a forklift truck on the back of a computer programming card. Some of you may recognize those kind of cards. In those days, Rob, as you remember from engineering school, it took hundreds of pages like that to run a program, and boy, were you up a creek if you got the order of the cards mixed up. I remember they'd be sitting in like a shoebox and, several hundred cards to run a program, and boy, were you up, like he said, up the creek. And that's his forklift truck. I can't remember. Is that here? Is it? Yeah. For the power board, Rob, I used a 1967 photo from an advertising page in a magazine. So this was the inspiration, not the 1960 DeSoto, the boat in the background. And here's his boat. It happens to have its number 6/23/67, June 23rd, 67. So this was a gift for probably Mom. So Dad, tell us about your personal favorites. Well, Rob, my personal favorites were tended to be those items that people wouldn't necessarily find attractive. Like what, Dad? Well, like the copper trash barrel. Those of you who understand machining would appreciate the fact that top, that lid, just slides right on. And the flutes, it's tapered and it's fluted. And the handle does pivot. And the other thing that was a favorite was the garbage pail. Now, I don't know if this is a big thing up here in Vermont. In Massachusetts, especially in urban environments where we lived, these were very common. And so the idea was this contraption sits in a hole in the ground. And you would step on the foot pedal here, and you could open it up. And now this is a concrete casing, and there's a pail that slides into this hole. So what would happen is there's a garbage truck that has a hopper on the back, and this fellow would come down the street, get out of the truck, walk into your yard, step on this thing, pull that pail out, which had your garbage, because you didn't have a garbage disposal in the house at that time. All right? So now this is full of garbage, and it's full of flies and all that maggot stuff. And this poor guy's job is to lift that pail out of there, march it back to the truck, throw the contents into the hopper of that vehicle, and then bring you the empty, but still dirty, pail, which he'd put back in there. Okay? Not very romantic item. This is Dad's interpretation of it. All right? So this is about this big. Now this is at the top. It sounds weird, but this is at the top of his favorites list, okay? And again, he's a machinist making aircraft engine parts. So these things have super small tolerances, or else they'd be considered scrap, all right? This pail just glides right after all these years. It just glides in and out of that. And there it is. So it looks like that. Okay, let's get my place here. Okay, let's go on, Dad. Other favorites, all right? Well, Rob, I always wanted a Homburg hat and a mirror stand for my bedroom, so I made one of each in miniature. Well, there's the hat, and that hat's only about this big. It's brass, and there is a band of copper going around. And the mirror stand is like that. This was a big thing in the 70s, and he didn't have one, so he made a miniature of it. Rob, I also like the aluminum quill pen with the ink holder. The pen is removable, and I had to find a large feather to use as the model. Rob, everyone liked my brass antique car that was based on a coin slot bank. So if we went to the bank as kids, we could get a bank. There's a slot at the top to put coins in. So he made his interpretation of that vehicle, which is this, which is in the case over here. Rob, they liked the wagon with the keg too. And there's the wagon with a keg, and that's here also. I've forgotten what is and what isn't here. Rob, the aluminum bathtub with clawed feet was popular. So this is his bathtub. It's about this big. These handles turn. The feet are clawed. And this little drain here is removable, which is, this drain is half the size of my fingernail. The kerosene lamp was also popular. Oh, that's not the kerosene lamp. What happened to the kerosene lamp? Okay, we're a little out of order here. Okay, take my word for it, there was a kerosene lamp. Rob, what happened here? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so his inspiration for that was this, which is me on a bad day in the backyard. Okay. There's the kerosene lamp. Okay. Rob, I also like the heavy brass water pump lamp I based on the wooden lamp you made in woodworking class in 7th grade. In 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the boys took woodworking, whether they were inclined or not to do woodworking, and the girls took home ec. Again, the same thing. So there was a lamp. The boys made a lamp. This is not my lamp, but it's like my lamp, okay? All wood. So that's the only piece that's left of my wooden lamp, okay? The rest of it broke. It doesn't say much for my woodworking skills. So he made his interpretation. And this one weighs 25 pounds and sits on my son's night table. And any time that this has to be dusted, it's a bit of an effort, lifting a 25-pound lamp that's not going anywhere. So, Dad, you said that the lamp was heavy. Tell us about the weight of some of your other pieces. Well, Rob, it was a real challenge getting some of the objects to the car, like the 11-pound brass asphalt roller. Is that here? I can't remember. I don't think so. And then there's the 17-pound blowtorch, solid brass, or the 19-pound full-size candlestick telephone. This piece, by itself, was exhibited at the New Hampshire Telephone Museum in Warner, I think. Is it Warner? And they made a special case just for that full-size phone. So, Dad, say a few words about the games you made. Well, Rob, first and foremost was the aluminum backgammon set, which you and your sisters must have played hundreds of games on, often in front of Grandma. So this is the aluminum set. Anybody who knows anything about backgammon knows that it can be a noisy game, but when you make it out of aluminum, it becomes a super noisy game. So here's my sister and myself playing on that board in front of my grandmother. And next he made a travel set, chess and backgammon. This is small. So, Dad, what about the metal book paperweights that you made us? Well, Rob, all the college graduations were special, so I engraved my metal books with your names, schools, and years of graduation. So, Dad, I liked your aluminum dice bookends with unlabeled books, which you intended as future gifts. There were multiples of these. Some were on the diagonal, some were on the flat face. There were many books, different sizes. These happened to be undated, unnamed, for future use. Dad, you even made Mom an aluminum book after many years, that after her graduation from nursing school. So here was my mother around 1951-ish on her graduation day. So he made her a book. And by the way, my sister and I donated her then cape to the Public Health Museum in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, where it hangs today. Rob, making the metal books was my way of telling you how proud I was of all of you. Dad, please elaborate on the gifts you made for people outside of our family. Well, Rob, I made for several friends paperweights, and for others small dinner bells on which I cast eagles. So here are the eagles, the little bells, and I'm happy to report that they're here for the first time. They're being exhibited. Now, this is 10 years. Becky and I have been working on this. Those pieces have never been shown before. So, Rob, I made pincushion stands for several friends. So, Becky has one as well. And I made many vases. So this vase is particularly special. Several years ago, after Becky and I had been doing what we're doing right now, I got a call from a friend who said, your father made several things for me. I would like to give them back to you. And I said, I can't accept that. He made it for you as a gift. He said, I would feel better if they're with the collection. And so I said, okay, I will make a deal with you. I will take them back on permanent loan. You can have it any time you want. Shortly after that, my sister called me up, and she said that her sister-in-law had called her up and said the same thing to her, that she wanted the vase, this vase, to come back to the collection. I think this is absolutely remarkable, because to have a collection of anything that is no longer growing because, the person is deceased, and now have people give you pieces back. So the collection has actually grown. It's unheard of. That's aluminum, by the way. All right, Dad, tell us about your closest friends and what you made for them. So, Rob, your mom's and my best friends were 5 other couples from church. This is my favorite photo. The reason I like this photo is, well, first of all, the photographer is the 12th person. All right, so there's 12 people, and if you look at them really carefully, no one is sitting next to their spouse. These people were really tight. So I'll continue here. Dad, I just have to tell the folks how special your relationship with these friends was. In this photo, you're the one waving, and no one is beside his or her significant other. All right? So what's up with that, Dad? So, Rob, their friendship meant everything to us. We truly enjoyed having them over on weekends. At noon on Saturdays, the wives would talk by phone, and by 6 o'clock, we'd all be together eating Armenian string cheese and choreg rolls from the freezer. We'd tell jokes and have a great time. This is completely unheard of today. I mean, just imagine, do you have 6 friends, 6 couples, say, that you could call on a Saturday and be together with that night? It just doesn't happen anymore. But this is over 50 years ago. Rob, I wanted to make something special for our friends when they came over, so I created a toothpick set with 12 swords, 1 sword per person. and that's his stand. Each one of the hilts on these swords is different. All right, so these are epis, I guess that's the word, and these are sabers, and they're all different. I knurled each one of them that way so that we could distinguish whose holder was whose when we stabbed the cheese. Of course, after a few shots of Cutty Sark Scotch, I'm not sure if anyone could tell the difference. Then we'd have strong Armenian coffee. So here they are out of the container. And speaking of coffee, Dad, you made a full-size demitasse cup and saucer of copper. So this is a full-size demitasse cup. And yes, Rob, but that wasn't for drinking out of. You'd burn your lip, which he did. So he drank out of it, hot coffee, burnt his lip. He made a smoking pipe out of brass, smoked it, and burnt his lip. You'd think he'd learn. Dad, I remember how much you talked about the machinist toolbox you crafted. Tell us about that, and I'm very happy to say that it is here. Rob, my actual toolbox was made of oak, made in the USA by Gerstner of Ohio, the standard for machinists. It says Mergerdichian right here, so that's his actual toolbox. We have this. I used it as my model, Rob, for I really wanted to make my rendition of it complete with machinist tools. So that toolbox there took about a year to complete. And there's about 40 tools inside of that. Dad, I suspect my allotted time is running out. As you look back, what do you think your major accomplishments were? Rob, raising you and your sisters with your mom was most important, along with taking care of my parents and having steady work after the war. Dad, you didn't mention your artwork. Well, Rob, that was okay, but I didn't consider myself an artist. Oh, really, Dad? Well, what was truly important to me was serving for 25 years on the executive committee of the Saturday Armenian Language School at church. Getting that award from the Archbishop was genuinely special for me. Oh, more tools. And here he is with the award. Well, Dad, you're pretty special. So, Rob, don't go getting mushy. By the way, can you remind me of some of the exhibits you've had? I'm pleased to tell you, Dad, that since 2014, your art has been on display, and here's a short list. The Boston and Providence Children's Museums. The Lynn Museum, given that GE is in Lynn, and Mom came from Lynn. The Museum of Science in Boston. The New Hampshire Telephone Museum, which I mentioned. Stonehill College in Massachusetts, where students in the public history class curated and installed the exhibit. The Mini Time Machine Museum of Miniatures in Tucson, Arizona in 2022. And most recently at the National Toy and Miniatures Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. You got covered in an article in the Boston Globe, and then a follow-up story on WCVB Chronicle in Boston, and also a story on national radio. So that you know, Dad, I'm on to a couple of other things. I'm looking for a publisher for a book about you, your art, and exhibits. The book's ready. I'm taking a watercolor class at the Methuen Senior Center, and I'm using your art as the model for my watercolors. That's very cool, Rob. Who would have, who would have known? Serked Talar, keep up the good work. I will, Dad, I will. So I have a few, that's the primary talk, and I have a few additional photos. So here's Dad at a bending machine. I'm not sure when this is, but this is at General Electric. And here's Dad and Mom. This is at a restaurant in Boston. And here he is. And just for everybody's information, those glasses are my computer glasses. So I changed the lenses, and I wear those glasses. And here I am at my former office, and you can see some of the items there. If you look carefully, you'll see that some of them are ones that I've already talked about. And I mentioned a birdhouse, and this birdhouse is at my sister's, and our little friend is living in that birdhouse. This is a 50-plus-year-old birdhouse, and birds still live in it, so I think that's pretty good. And I saved the best photo for last. And the best photo has nothing to do with my father's metal art. Here's Becky. Here's me. Me with a hat that says LCI 713, another LCI, not the one he served on, and our first and only grandson. So there's the information, and that's, so thank you. This is the primary presentation. Do I have? Thank you. Do I have?